This week, I thought we'd take a look at some of the still lingering mysteries from Silent Hill F and see what we can uncover. Because there sure are a lot of mysteries here, and, in true Silent Hill fashion, the game tends to leave you to figure out stuff for yourself and not provide a definitive answer either way. So let's head on in and see what we can uncover. 1. Is Junko actually dead? This is perhaps the biggest mystery that most people will agree on. I know there are some who would argue that Junko doesn't even exist in the first place, but I'm not one of those. I think the game gives us more than enough to state definitively that yes, Junko is, or at least was, an actual person. The real question is Junko still alive by the time Hinako's wedding takes place? Now, while the game obviously never outright states that Junko is dead, it does give a lot of evidence to suggest that she might be. For example, she doesn't seem to be at Hinako's wedding back at real Ebisugaoka. In the red capsule ending, we can hear Hinako's parents screaming and asking her what's wrong as she goes on her rampage. We also hear Kotoyuki, Sakuko, Rinko, and Shu's voices. Although, the last three could also be argued to simply be Hinako hearing things because of the red capsules. Either way, we don't hear Junko, and that's weird, because you would expect her to be at her sister's wedding, right? And if we look at the Fox's Sacrifice game in the school, again, Hinako's parents and friends are on the list, but Junko is once again missing. Here, we're told what's going to happen to each of the characters in the future. But if Junko isn't alive, well, there isn't a future to tell, is there? And in her journal, Hinako speaks of seeing Junko pregnant in the hospital and what a bad state she was in. This seems to have played a large part in Hinako's fear of marriage and childbirth. But if she was in such a bad state that it traumatized Hinako this much, does that mean that perhaps she didn't survive the birth? After all, the Junko in the Tengu mask we run into throughout the game isn't her. Not exactly, but a manifestation thanks to Hinako's consumption of the red capsules. The opening scene is likely a memory of the real Junko, and if you watched my video on Junko's bell, then you can see how it's possible she left the bell behind in the final scene of the arguable true ending as well. This doesn't change if Junko is dead, and arguably only really makes sense if she is dead. But at the end of the day, the game doesn't tell us one way or the other, but it does seem to be leaning in one direction. What do you guys think? 2. Is the Shu that travels through the foggy Ebisugaoka realm with Hinako the real Shu? This is an interesting one, and it takes piecing together what's even happening in the game to begin with before you can really approach it. So, let's very quickly and simply sum it up. As we learn, Hinako has been taking red capsules that Shu gave her to help with her headaches. In reality, these capsules contain Kakura Makakura, a substance that allows you to meet and talk to your inner self. But because this is made from white Claudia, it also has side effects that basically open you up to the divine and allow you to be more easily possessed. Meaning, our travels through the game aren't really taking place in the real world. The events of the game are taking place, for the most part, within Hinako, and she's being manipulated by two divine sides that each want her to do their bidding. So, when we see Sakuko die at the start of the game, obviously she's not actually dead. The real Sakuko is still out there and planning to attend Hinako's wedding, so she can finally wish her well and accept her friend is moving on without her. Shu and Rinko, in Hinako's mind, are also taken at some point, and Hinako finds them strung up in her house like they're on Dead by Daylight hooks. However, we know that the real Shu is also attending the wedding thanks to various endings, And a crumpled note in Rinko's bedroom also appears to be a letter she was going to read at the wedding, before tossing it. So, although they die in Hinako's mind, sometimes, several times, they're not actually her friends, and we know they're still alive back in the real world. So, why is this even a question? Well, in New Game Plus, one of the first cutscene changes we see is when Hinako passes out for the first time and we switch to soon-to-be Fox Hinako in the Dark Shrine. This time, we see Shu rush in and grab Hinako as she passes out, something we're not privy to the first time around. Why was this kept from us? What does it mean? The significance of this is something that has been debated for a while now. Why does this small difference matter? Why wasn't it shown the first time around? If we think about what these transitions between the Hinakos really mean, well, it shows her consciousness slipping from one to the other, right? The two Hinakos are rarely in the same space together, and it's not until the Shimizu residence that they finally meet for the first time. The effects of the Kakura Makakura have finally progressed enough that the inner selves can talk. And here, Fox Hinako realizes that she basically comes from Ebisugaoka, or Fog Hinako, the original, if you will, and these two halves of herself must battle it out for one to come out on top, so they can settle this torn nature inside her. But if these transitions up until now signify Hinako's consciousness basically flitting between her two halves, how can it be possible that Shu is there and able to grab her as she blacks out? For this to be possible, doesn't that have to mean that Shu is actually real too? He doesn't disappear while Hinako transitions, and now that we're more aware of what's happening in the story, we're allowed to see this. Now, there's some extra weight to this theory that comes from Ryu Kishi himself. In an interview with a Japanese gaming website, he mentioned that Hinako isn't the only one going on a Silent Hill-ish journey. Shu is as well, but we don't see what he's going through because, well, we're playing the game from Hinako's point of view. So, while Hinako might be seeing Kashimashi and Ayakakashi and whatnot, that's not necessarily what Shu is seeing. Nor is he even experiencing the same thing as her. But if this all takes place in Hinako's mind, how do we reconcile that? Again, the key is that we're seeing Hinako's point of view. She still exists in the real world. The wedding is still taking place around her. We can hear radio broadcasts throughout the game that appear to be from guests at the wedding as it's happening. Time is moving. Things are happening. Hinako is on a hell of a journey that's, for the most part, taking place in a divine landscape within herself. But the rest of the world hasn't stopped moving while she's doing that. We know specifically that Shu of all people is there too, and perhaps most importantly, he also partook of the Kakura Makakura. He already met his inner self, and he has also opened himself up to the divine. In fact, one of the endings sees him getting fully possessed by the Tsukumogami, and the novel also gives us a little extra information on how this is possible, by revealing that Shu took Hinako's doll when she threw it out as a kid, and kept it all these years. Shu is also going on his own journey. They've both taken the Kakura Makakura, and are thus both open to the divine war that's taking place around and within them. It's not that hard to imagine that, at points, their journeys do actually cross. The Shu that grabs Hinako as she passes out may actually be the real Shu. The Shu that gets strung up in her house wasn't the real Shu, but rather a manifestation caused by the Tsukumogami, who is trying to scare her out of marriage. The Shu that dies in the Dark Shrine also isn't the real Shu, but rather a manifestation caused by the Inari to get Hinako to forget and move on from her former life. But why is he in a school uniform, I hear you saying? Again, we're seeing this from Hinako's point of view. One of the endings even has Hinako remarking that Shu looks weird in a tie, even though he appears to us wearing a school uniform. And he makes fun of her wearing that, pointing out what is likely her wedding kimono, even though to us she appears to still be wearing her school uniform too. Hinako's point of view is incredibly unreliable. She's still under the influence of the Kakura Makakura, after all. So ultimately, it is possible that at various points of the game, Hinako is interacting with the real Shu, as he's one of the few that's able to join her on her White Claudia-induced trip. But the game never outright states this, so it's still somewhat of a mystery. What do you guys think? 3. Did Rinko push Hinako down the stairs? I've seen so much debate over this one. Again, because of the reveal in the New Game Plus cutscene that shows flowers appearing on the stairs as Hinako falls. First time around, we're clearly meant to think Rinko did it. After all, the doll just warned us. Second time around, we see flowers and vines, now making us question that knowledge. Well, actually, the doll might not be working with our best interests in mind. So, did Hinako actually just trip? Interestingly, the mocap for this scene somewhat does answer the question. If you break the camera here, you can see Rinko standing behind Hinako as she falls, with her arms stretched out. Looks an awful lot like she did actually push her. Once again, it's important to keep in mind that this isn't the real Rinko. This is a manifestation created by Hinako's fears and worries, and exacerbated by the Tsukumogami, who's literally there at the bottom of the stairs when this happens. So the implication is that, yes, Rinko did actually push her down the stairs. But we never directly see that. And that's for a good reason. This isn't the real Rinko, so whether Hinako actually tripped or was pushed is honestly a moot point. The only thing that matters here for Hinako is that she thinks she was pushed. Was she? Maybe. Probably. But perhaps she really did just trip on those vines and Fog Rinko was instead reaching out to grab her and help assist her out. Who knows? Either way, the Tsukumogami still got what they wanted. Hinako in a tortured state of mind over her friends. 4. What on earth is the giant Kokeshi head in the Shimizu residence? This one, as far as I know, does still remain a mystery, and I haven't seen any real consensus in either the English or the Japanese side of the fandom on what this is supposed to be. Deep in the Shimizu residence, you can find this absolute unit of a Kokeshi doll, and next to it, a page from Mum's diary. April 7, 1961. I still have trouble believing it. How could things turn out this way? At first glance, you might think this diary is related to the Kokeshi head, but after repeatedly running through the Shimizu residence over numerous playthroughs, it would appear that this diary page actually refers to Kimie's illness, which was likely diagnosed around this time. So, setting that red herring aside, what does the giant Kokeshi doll mean? Kokeshi dolls, quite simply, are children's toys. Yet, we are in a horror game, and in horror, they generally have a much darker meaning, with an old urban legend claiming that these dolls serve as memorials for lost children. And this particular Kokeshi doll looks scarily like Hinako's father, doesn't it? So, there are two potential ways to read this. If we accept the lost child theory, then it perhaps signifies Junko's death from earlier, as well as, possibly, her child. The Shimizu residence gives us numerous dates and events, and it's interesting to note that Junko never appears after 1960. The Kokeshi head can be found in the Shimizu Residence 3, which has the date of April 7th, 1961. This is, presumably, the date Hinako accepts Kotoyuki's engagement proposal. But if Junko did actually pass away sometime during the last year, perhaps all these Kokeshi dolls manifested as Hinako tries to deal with the inner turmoil of that. And this also leads us to the second and more metaphorical option, with Hinako getting engaged to Kotoyuki around this date, and thus her childhood dying. She's now going to become an adult, and these dolls represent the death of her innocence, if you will. Or hey, maybe it's both. I've also seen a theory proposed in the Japanese side of the fandom that this giant Kokeshi doll might be a little more meta. That perhaps it is a kami, greater than the two sides at war here in Ebisugaoka, and it is merely watching the battle unfold, seeing what Hinako will do. After all, the eyes seem to watch not just Hinako, but even us, the player, as we move around. Perhaps this Kokeshi doll is a stand-in for the creators of the game themselves, and its resemblance to Eileen's giant head from Silent Hill 4 is yet another little Easter egg to pull you out of the game for a moment and remind you of that. I'm not sure how much I agree with this one myself, but what do you guys think? 5. What is Sakuko doing at the shrine from New Game Plus onwards? This is one of my favourite moments in the game, so I'm excited to talk about it again. If you visit Sakuko's shrine in New Game Plus, we're treated to a beautiful and honestly kind of creepy scene. Inside, you can see a shrine maiden performing a ritual that ends with a big flash of light and then everything goes dark. Clearly it's Sakuko, but what's happening here? It's an incredibly small scene that has stirred up quite a bit of debate. Again, once you play through the game numerous times, you end up learning just how powerful Sakuko really is. Both sides of this divine war also initially fight for her attention, and in the end, she sides with the Tsukumogami. Although, even this part is debatable, as it's more likely that she's actually just siding with the old tree faith, and to the best of her knowledge, that's what the Tsukumogami is. But anyway, either way, Sakuko is able to commune with the divine without needing the Kakura Makakura, and she's so powerful that she has to be removed from Hinako's presence not once, not twice, but 3 times. I once saw a comment comparing her to a gamer getting constantly kicked by the server admins, but she keeps creating new accounts and finding her way back in because she really wants to help her friend, and she's too powerful to be kept out. Which actually isn't that bad of an analogy. At any rate, in my personal opinion, this scene explains itself in literally the final few frames. If you slow it down and watch carefully, the explosion seems to tear a hole right through Sakuko. When we see her appearing in the Dark Shrine, in her Shrine Maiden clothes, no less, what's the first thing we see? Yeah, a big ol' hole right in the middle of her chest, and a gaping hole where her chin and neck should be. What does this mean? It means this scene was very likely Sakuko performing a ritual, after getting booted by one of the server admins, aka the Inari faction, to log into the Dark Shrine and try her luck helping Hinako there instead. After all, a bunch of the lines she says during that boss fight seem curious, don't they? She keeps talking about how Hinako shouldn't be there, how she's here to save her. With how powerful Sakuko is, and how it takes Fox Mask himself showing up to banish her from his own realm, well, it's really not out of the realm of possibility that Sakuko sent herself there after also getting booted out of the Fog realm. Again, Sakuko is a ride or die kind of friend, and I think this scene exists to show not just that, but more of her true powers as well. Shu needs the Kakura Makakura to interact with the divine, but Sakuko was simply born with it, and she really is a force to be reckoned with. She is, at the end of the day, perhaps the only force in the game that does actually have Hinako's best interests at heart too. At least, once she accepts that she's not actually being betrayed. And that is 5 of the still lingering mysteries from Silent Hill F. I'll no doubt be making a second video as there are still lots of mysteries in the game, but if there are any in particular that you'd like me to look at, let me know in the comments and I'll see you again next time.